This is the third in a series of sermons that's on a theme that's near and dear to my heart. It is a theme that can be described as either A, faith versus atheism, or B, it is how do you claim a faith that's authentic to you in the midst of a cynical and disbelieving world? And so a couple of Sundays ago, we talked about the foundation of that, which is if you're going to respond to atheism, you need to broaden the playing field. That you have to understand that life is not confined to test tube type rules, but with an experience that's much broader than that. We use the image of children, remember? And the playfulness and the openness that kids naturally have, and that we still have. Then last week we talked about transcendence, the sense that there's a whole different side of life that we encounter by accident that deepens our perception of things. We're going to talk about a different side of this now. We're going to make it more personal. But before we go into the sermon, I would remind you that I have a discussion class on this. Every Wednesday night, we discuss the sermon of the previous Sunday, and that's in room 141 from 6:30 to 7:30, and I would certainly welcome your dialogue because I'm giving a monologue, and it's not fair for me to do all the talking. Let us pray. Lord our God, would you please move your Spirit in the words about to be spoken and heard into that which will be thought and felt, so that in all ways we honor the living Christ in our midst. Amen. For Christians, Moses is the person in the Bible, and for Jews, Moses is the person in the Bible, and for Christians, at least the second most important person. Moses was born at a time when there was a population explosion of Hebrew slaves. Pharaoh was nervous, so he decided to kill off all Hebrew male babies 2 years of age and under. Well, Moses' mom put him in a basket, floated him down the Nile, and by coincidence, Pharaoh's daughter picked him up, raised him in the palace. As a young man, Moses saw an Egyptian abusing a Hebrew slave. He intervenes, the Egyptian dies, and Moses becomes a wanted man. He takes up the occupation of shepherding, thinking that the Egyptian police will not see him or seek him there. And one day, as he is grazing his sheep on a mountainside, this happens.
There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire out of a bush. He looked, and the bush was blazing, yet it was not consumed. Then Moses said, I must turn aside and look at this great sight and see why the bush is not burned up. When the Lord saw that he had turned aside to see, God called to him out of the bush, Moses, Moses. And he said, Here I am. Then he said, Come no closer. Remove the sandals from your feet, for the place on which you are standing is holy ground. He said further, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. Then the Lord said, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their sufferings, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, a land flowing with milk and honey.
Now, get carefully in your mind's eye the story that Bonnie just read you. Moses, minding his own business, encounters the burning bush. And if you note, a very interesting quirk is in that story. Moses could have glanced on it and said, why isn't that interesting, but continues his sheep grazing on to lush pastures. But he didn't. He stopped, and it says, when the Lord saw that Moses had stopped, he starts talking to Moses. This is if not the, starting point for faith. You will, if you've not already done so, and I think we've already done so, will encounter burning bushes. If you stop to consider what is going on, if you stop and let a burning bush be like electroshock therapy, make your ordinary thought processes, put them on hold, then God, seeing you stop, will talk to you. Moses' first encounter with God enabled him to talk into the depths of life. And from that point on, Moses was able to communicate in a more authentic, a broader, deeper way. He was able to find a purpose for his life and ultimately work with God in changing history. This is how we start moving to an authentic faith. It follows this pattern that an incident happens in your life. There's a weird burning bush type of thing. You have to have the grace to stop and ask, I don't see that every day. What's going on here? And as you pursue that, as you search for an answer, you get an answer. Hello, I'm God. And your life changes. Because you see what happens? You have been given an instance, a coincidence, if you want to put it that way, that if you have the grace to take it seriously and stop your normal, everyday, hurried and harried routine, you have an opportunity to finally hear the voice of God speaking just for you. I'm not going to call these incidences necessarily burning bushes. I want to call them coincidences, because every one of us, I think, has had an incident where you think, wow, isn't that weird? Isn't that unusual? Isn't that out of the ordinary? Isn't that irrational? And it gets you in touch with the depths. So we'll call them transcendent coincidences, if you will, TCs. And a few weeks ago, I, in an email blast, asked you to respond with stories of such coincidences that happen in everyday life for you that made you stop and go more into the depths. And the stories I received from you all were fascinating. And if you, in this sermon, think of a couple, email me back. I'd like to see what they are. One person, a woman, told me of traveling to Florida with her sister. And they stop in a little backwoods Alabama town for a break. They go to McDonald's. And as this woman goes into McDonald's, there's a man that passes her going out. For some reason, she turned around and saw that as he was walking back to the car, he had a certain distinctive walk that she recognized. He was going to a car that had Missouri plates. And she calls out his name, and he turns around. It was her boyfriend from high school 40 years ago. Sure, it happens all the time. Yeah. And so for 45 minutes, they sit in that McDonald's, little out-of-the-way place, and they talk and just have a great time. Well, they go the separate ways, and for months, she said, she wondered, was there something more to that? I mean, that's weird. And she said she found an answer because a few months later, she got word that he had died from an aneurysm. But here's how she ended her email to me. God gave me the chance to say goodbye to him. I felt blessed for that. A couple of seconds here or there, and they would never have seen each other. But God made sure they did. Another member of this congregation emailed a story. His name is Michael, and he has a daughter, Olivia, who graduated Mizzou in 2009. In February of 2009, Michael is driving around 270 and 44 when he gets a call from his daughter, Olivia. And Olivia says, "Hi, Dad, I've decided that when I graduate college, I'm going to go to Africa and work in a mission." In Michael's words, I almost drove off the road. Your tuition dollars at work, you know. But, you know, he took her seriously and wanted to be supportive. Olivia went on to search the net for a place because she had no place in mind. She asked friends in her church, and Michael in his office sent out an email asking if anybody had contacts in Africa, maybe a relative or a friend who's doing mission work there. Turns out that one of his partners in his firm, who lives in his own subdivision, emailed back that he has a sister by the name of Lynn Peters who has started a mission, started a school in a little West African country called Burkina Faso. Well, he thought, Michael did, I'll tell Olivia about that. After all, Olivia babysat his partner's kids because they're in the same subdivision. So maybe that would ring a bell for Olivia. Olivia, for her part, had already heard someone refer to Burkina Faso and Lynn Peters. So when they talked, it was like, And then when Michael explained the situation, Olivia said, "You mean I have already babysat for Lynn Peters' nephews and niece?" It seemed like, well, this was a clear direction. And everywhere that Olivia went to raise money, everybody seemed to have heard of Lynn Peters and Burkina Faso. Still, Michael said that as the time approached for Olivia to leave, he was a little nervous. I mean, she's going off by herself to Africa. Then one day the deal was sealed, as he said. He was in his house and his wife was downstairs going through some old pictures when suddenly she almost shouts and she runs up the stairs and says, "Look at this." And it was a picture that Michael and his wife Andrea and Olivia had long since forgotten about. It was a picture of when Olivia was in the 7th grade and she was part of the Model UN, where kids could pick out a country to study more in depth. And this picture shows a group of Olivia and her friends with the name of the country they had picked out that Olivia had long ago forgotten. Here's the picture, and the country is Burkina Faso. Olivia is the one who's very serious to the far right, by the way, up there, picture. Michael closed his story by saying this: "Now that's what I call a coincidence. Actually, it was more than that. It was a message from God that He had a plan for Olivia and was watching over her. All our hesitation vanished." Friends, it is the most childlike thing in the world to imagine that such coincidences are somehow orchestrated by the God who orchestrated the burning bush. Yeah, it's childlike. It is one of the most faithful things we could ever do in our lives. God throws burning bushes our way with the same deliberateness that God can orchestrate Burkina Faso or arrange 2 people to meet in Alabama. And once you let that sink in, once you stop and ask, what's going on here, then the world opens up. I think from my own experience, sometimes you're best able to see a transcendent coincidence, a TC, when there's something going on in your life, when you're vulnerable, when you're facing some uncertainty. When I was a senior in high school and trying to figure out what to do with my life, I was really considering the ordained ministry, but I wasn't quite too sure. So one day, I'm out helping a farmer clear a field, chopping and whacking and hacking all the underbrush. Took a chainsaw, which proved to me that there's never a ghost of a chance for me to ever be a farmer. Took a chainsaw, started cutting all the underbrush there, and finally, my back was hurting, and I put the chainsaw down. As I put the chainsaw down, I saw an unusual sight. There were 2 sticks that were just at perpendicular degree angles, just right where my chainsaw was. I said, well, that's odd that they would just be lying there like that. I picked it up and I discovered that actually the 2 sticks had grown together. And the only thing different, it was just like this, except this branch was a little bit longer, so I snapped it off. And I don't know if you could see it, but the vertical stick is like a crucifix, that you see in the Catholic Church. I looked at that, and I majored in religion. And it's gone with me every step of the way in dorm rooms and whatever church I served, just as a reminder that, friends, this world is not supposed to make sense. And when you understand that you're not the center of the universe and the world does not act according to test tube rules, but is much broader, where God can throw in an incident in a McDonald's parking lot or somehow make two sticks grow together right where I put my chainsaw, or there's a Burkina Faso sign around. God gets our attention. And it doesn't have to be in the in-your-face type of way that I've been talking about. It might be more subtle. It might be that you're one of those type A personalities who really enjoys working and working hard in the office. You really have a passion to climb that ladder. You say you're doing it for the kids and the family, but you know really you're doing it for yourself. You like the plaques, the awards, exceeding the goals. You like the more money. And you know that you are in line for this promotion up to district. You can taste it. Everybody knows you're the man. Everybody knows that you have produced what you need to produce. You're the rising star. You're the Albert Pujols of a few years ago for your company. The district people know, the corporate folks know, and when it comes time to announce who got that promotion to district, your name is not mentioned. It's somebody else. And it makes absolutely no sense to you whatsoever because you've earned it. You've towed the line, and now you're mad. You're grieving. But as the days and the weeks pass, you understand that that was not an accident. You understand that you had to stop, and you have to ask, what's going on here? And you discovered what was going on there. You discovered that God was nudging you into a deeper world, a world where you can go home and discover the mystery and the majesty, which is your spouse and your children, a world where you know that promotions will come and go, but what really matters are the people you love and the difference you make in life. Transcendent coincidences enable you to see that the film between our ordinary lives and the depth of life, the spiritual life, is very, very thin. And those burning bushes are times when the film disappears altogether. And you have the luxury, you have the opportunity to begin seeing another side of life, a deeper side that is just as coherent and consistent as the ordinary E = MC² side of life. And as you have the grace to live that out, like in this community, chasing whatever's behind those coincidences, then is when you see and hear, you see the face and you hear the voice of God. So the takeaway from this sermon is quite simple. Sometime today, not tomorrow, sometime today, before it turns 7 degrees tonight, sometime today, have the luxury of remembering the transcendent coincidences in your life, from as early as you can remember to now. You might even write them down, put them on the refrigerator, because you start seeing the thread. And personally, whenever I have those periods of doubt, when things don't make sense, when I question how could there be a God when such and such happens, I simply sit back and I remember those TCs. And I remember those are subtle messages that say to me, as they say to you, you are not alone. You are loved, and there is a purpose for your life. And those transcendent coincidences are nothing more but invitations for you to discover that. So, my friends, the question really isn't, does God exist? The question is, why would God care about me? To answer that question for yourself, hear it from the Bible. Isaiah speaking for God. Can a woman forget her nursing child or show no compassion for the child of her womb? Even though they may forget, yet I will not forget you. See, I have inscribed you on the palms of my hands. Jeff, Andy, Deborah, Sarah, everybody, God has inscribed your face on the palm of God's hand. So when God is out there at the far reaches of the cosmos creating the black holes and the dark matter and all of that, God takes a break and looks and says, oh yeah, and comes back here and for you does something incredible in your life that makes you stop and makes you remember who and whose you are. And that is the time when you are connected back to the one who loves you with this incredible love. Remember your transcendent coincidences, your burning bushes, because next week we're going to talk about the one burning bush that unites us all, the greatest burning bush of all, the burning bush called Jesus of Nazareth.